welcome to Planetterrian Daily, episode 74, from May 31st, 2026. Here's what's new in science, health, and longevity research. Looking back at 5 episodes from 2026, May 25th, to 2026, May 31st, several threads stand out because they point to concrete mechanisms rather than broad promises. The stories range from tissue-level repair in the heart to waste clearance routes in the brain, from microbial influences on blood pressure to molecular nodes in lipid handling, and onward to engineered immune cells, early life environmental effects, planetary resource trends, fish gut chemistry, and plant immune adjustments. What links them is a focus on measurable pathways that can now be tested further. The first of these comes from work on heart failure. Patches derived from stem cells were applied directly to the ventricles of 20 patients with severe disease. Cardiac function and overall health status improved in 12 of those participants at the 6-month mark. The patches integrate new muscle tissue and act as a biological ventricular assist device, rather than relying solely on pharmacological support. The New England Journal of Medicine paper lays out the surgical delivery method, along with the follow-up measurements that tracked those changes. One implication is that this approach advances the timeline question on organ regeneration by showing that donor-derived tissue can take on pump assist duties in a living heart. Larger randomized studies will now be watched for durability data, because the 6-month window leaves open how long the functional gains hold once the initial inflammatory phase settles. From cardiac tissue repair, the conversation turns to how the brain manages its own cleanup. In a mouse model, the brain's glymphatic network removed beta amyloid through a fast surface pathway between the skull and meninges. A second deeper pathway relied on diffusion and operated more than 30 times slower. The dual route finding explains how metabolic waste exits both superficial and parenchymal regions under varying conditions. The study published in Science Advances maps clearance kinetics across different physiological states, which matters because it separates rapid surface flow from slower internal diffusion, rather than treating clearance as a single uniform process. Researchers plan to test whether similar routes appear in human imaging, and that next step will determine whether the mouse kinetics translate to measurable differences in people at risk for protein accumulation. Shifting to vascular responses that intersect with the oral microbiome, older adults who drank concentrated nitrate-rich beetroot juice twice daily for 2 weeks showed measurable reductions in blood pressure. The same regimen produced no comparable change in younger participants. The effect coincided with shifts in the composition of bacteria living in the mouth, and researchers link the nitrate to nitrite conversion performed by these microbes to the observed vascular response. This contributes to the microbiome program by addressing the causation versus correlation question through a short, controlled intervention that ties microbial activity directly to a physiological readout. The next step is testing whether the microbiome changes are necessary for the benefit, which would clarify if altering those bacteria could become a practical lever for blood pressure management in older adults. Staying with molecular control points, a liver protein called HELS2 shuts down production of the cholesterol carrier apoB. The identification provides a new molecular node in lipid metabolism regulation that sits within the genetics and genomics program. Because the finding pinpoints a specific regulatory step, the in vivo editing safety question now includes this target as one more candidate whose off-target effects would need checking before any therapeutic use. Follow-up functional studies will be watched next to see how broadly HELS2 influences other aspects of lipoprotein assembly. From intracellular lipid control, the focus moves to immune cell engineering against solid tumors. McGill University scientists temporarily inhibited a pair of surface proteins on natural killer cells. The treated cells then penetrated the protective barriers erected by leukemia, glioblastoma, kidney cancer, and triple-negative breast cancer cells. Laboratory tests showed markedly higher killing efficiency against these hard-to-treat lines. The approach remains preclinical, so the immediate implication is that removing those 2 surface checkpoints can restore NK cell access to tumor microenvironments that normally exclude them. In vivo safety readouts will be watched next because any clinical translation will require confirming that the temporary inhibition does not create lasting changes in NK cell behavior outside the tumor setting. Environmental exposures introduce another layer that shapes long-term health trajectories. Population data from the United Kingdom link higher pollution exposure to reduced lung function trajectories in children. The longitudinal evidence adds to public health understanding of early life environmental impacts by showing that the effect appears in repeated measures rather than single snapshots. This pattern suggests that pollution does not simply cause acute irritation, but alters the slope of lung development itself during critical growth windows. Human health effects of pollution lead naturally to planetary-scale resource pressures documented over 2 centuries. A comprehensive review of population and environmental records spanning more than 2 centuries found that resource strain began outweighing innovation gains decades ago. The study tracked how early population growth supported technological expansion before planetary boundaries became the dominant constraint. Researchers documented accelerating pressure on multiple Earth systems simultaneously, marking a reversal from historical patterns where human numbers drove progress. Follow-up modeling will examine regional differences in overshoot severity, which matters because uniform global averages can mask places already experiencing sharper limits on water, soil, or atmospheric capacity. Planetary boundaries frame the next observation on how marine life itself participates in carbon chemistry. Researchers examined the Gulf toadfish and identified symbiotic bacteria in its intestine capable of precipitating calcium carbonate. The process occurs under conditions created by the fish digestive chemistry and microbial metabolism. Work published in PLOS Biology links this activity to broader marine carbon chemistry because the minerals can sink and sequester carbon. Experiments showed the bacteria produce the precipitate even outside the host when supplied with appropriate substrates, which opens a route to testing whether the same microbes could be cultured independently for carbon-related applications. Next measurements will test how widespread this capability is across other marine fish species, extending the microbiome program to environmental carbon cycling rather than limiting it to host health. From animal microbiomes, the episode closes with a plant-level immune strategy that may inform viral defense research. Work published in Science demonstrates that Arabidopsis and other plants actively downregulate immune pathways during specific viral infections. The downregulation allows survival without full defense activation, suggesting that complete immune engagement can carry costs that outweigh benefits under certain conditions. This finding adds nuance to how organisms balance defense against self-damage across kingdoms. Before we go, keep an eye on follow-up data from the stem cell patch trial and human glymphatic imaging studies expected in coming weeks. Those 2 threads, along with the microbiome and pollution findings, illustrate how mechanistic detail at one scale can inform questions at another without requiring any single breakthrough to carry the full weight of clinical or environmental change. That covers today's science and health news. Share this with someone who's curious about the latest research. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. See you next time. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.